So we're just speaking with loud, clear voices, using our mystery object, which we are not allowed to name, but viewers have to guess based on how it affects us.
Yes. We have a bidding for the mystery object after every podcast, and
That's how we're gonna
so
raise
far
money.
none of them have been solved. But this will be the first. I'm going to put the mystery object on our mystery guest's head.
There's a slight change in the audio when I use this object.
Yeah.
That gives you a hint.
Also, if I try to put a lot of weight on this object, very firmly, and kind of surprisingly for how thin it is, just doesn't give at all.
It's a very strong object.
Very strong object. So that's cool.
Just like an integer. Such a strong object. Yeah. Float sinus. Oh, that's not a very good joke. But integers in computers are encoded firmly, whereas floating points and doubles, well, I don't mean encoded firmly. I mean, if you put an integer in a computer, it's going to stay that number all the time. If you try to put in 2.5 or something, and you do a lot of stuff with that, it's going to slightly drift because it doesn't encode as 2.5 exactly. It encodes as 2.4999999.
Why?
Well, because it's just because of the way that floating point numbers, which is what they're called, set up. What is it? It's something to the power of something else. So you get a lot of different numbers, but they're only accurate to 10 decimal places or something. Anyway, I can't remember. Just look it up. Something precise like that. All right, should we go around to intros?
Yeah.
No, go for it.
My name's Reuben.
Yeah, I think we should introduce the guest, not just. Oh, sorry, never mind.
Wait, what do you mean?
No, no mind.
This is good. This is part of the.
Yeah, we'll cut this.
Podcast.
We're not drunk yet. We'll cut this bit out. I just stepped up. My name's Hunter.
My name's Johnny Joe.
And this is Johnny Joe. Johnny Joe he's a lawyer. He's just here to make sure that we don't offend anyone like last time. So I'm sorry, Granny Sue or whoever it was won't be coming back on the podcast
Granny
this
Sue,
week.
I remember that. Yeah.
Johnny's, what's your name?
Johnny Joe.
JJ. JJ the lawyer is here to keep us in line.
How can you forget the Honourable Johnny Joe?
Classic man.
No, can you say your real name so that you're recognised? Or you don't want to be recognised on this shitty podcast?
Johnny's happy to
Oh my god.
Maybe it's a very famous person. We've got someone famous on the podcast that doesn't want to bring themselves down.
Yeah. Last name Deaf. Give me anything. My name's Reuben. I'll be in charge of the history segment of this podcast.
Did we already do this? My name's Hunter. I'll be in charge of the speaking segment.
Yep. Alright, that's the intro.
That's the intros are done. We'll probably fast forward that.
Now, a quick word from our sponsor. Hello. That was a quick word from our sponsor. It's the owner of BP. Pretty crazy. We're pretty set for life with money. Also, he doesn't need to advertise because they're pretty big. So.
Biggest name around.
Yeah.
Except there's only 2 letters, so it's impressive it's the biggest name.
Simplicity, right? Less is more.
Alright, should I do my segment first? Oh shit, what was I going to say?
Yeah, you usually do, right?
Yeah, alright, I was going to talk a little bit about something I learned recently, so I'm probably going to get a lot of precision things in it wrong, but I've been learning about how computers can understand words. So for basically a very long time, just taste a little my chicken. Taste a little bit of it. So words in computers used to be done where you get a big long vector, which is like a series of numbers, and it would be just have a 0 or 1 in it. The vector would be 200,000 numbers long, and you put a 0 next to all of them, except for a 1 next to one of them. And it's just a dictionary.
What do you mean next to?
In that position in the vector. So you put a 1 in one spot, and 0s in every other spot.
So for listeners at home, am I visualizing just a long line of numbers?
Just a long line of numbers, and call it a vector. So words used to be encoded where you just get all the words possible, a dictionary, and then if you want to encode the word the, which is, say, the 5,000th word in the dictionary, but 0s everywhere and a 1 next to the word the. 1 in the 5,000th position in the vector. But in the last 10, 20 years or so, it's gotten much better recently. People have come up with a way where we can actually encode the meaning of the words in a much shorter way. So you get a vector the same way, which is 100 numbers long, but these numbers can be anywhere between, let's say, -1 and 1. So you just start with all the words and give them a random set of numbers, random set of strange numbers each. Totally random, they can't do anything yet. And then you're going to get all the text on the internet, every single bit of text you can possibly find, everywhere. And you're going to pick a bit of that text and pick a word from it. Let's say you find a sentence that says, the pig sat down. And you pick a random word from that sentence, pig. And then you pick another word in the sentence, and you're going to train a neural network, just a normal neural network.
What's a normal neural network?
We covered that 2 weeks ago, Reuben.
Just a quick recap.
A neural network is it's a way of doing machine learning where you have a bunch of layers, and each layer multiplies by the input it multiplies the input into it times by some value that it learns. All right. We're not going to explain neural networks here because that's a whole topic unto itself. So assuming you know what a neural network is, you grab all the text ever, pick a little bit of that text, any part, find a word, say the word pig, and then you're going to try and predict what word belongs next to pig, or just before pig, or 2 words after pig, any of them. So you're trying to predict, given the word pig, what word do you expect to see near it? So you train that on on all the language ever, as if it's a neural network. So you've got an input, you're trying to predict a single word output. But the random vector that we started with is going to be treated like it's weights of the neural network. So we're going to slightly change the encoding for the word pig, so that it's better at predicting whatever words are around it in our entire set of data. And if you do that 1 trillion times with all the language that's ever been written, you end up with kind of encoding for every word that kind of represents what the word is in like a sensible way. So if you took the encoding for the word man and subtracted the encoding for from the word woman, it would be the same as if you took the encoding for the word boy and subtracted the encoding for the word girl, right? So now we know the difference between things because we've found some direction inside that encoding that classifies gender. It turns out you can do that with lots of things. You want to translate? You've got these encodings. Just do the same thing again with French and find the closest encoding to the word that you want to translate to French. So it goes from English word encoding, find the nearest encoding in French word. Bam, good translation. You don't even have to have a human do anything. And you don't have to be able to speak French, have anyone that speaks French to be able to do that translation. Or even a dictionary of French to English words. You can do lots of things by it. If you want to encode, say, something that you don't have a lot of data for, like you want to predict text based off what I write in my phone, and you want it to be stuck with me, like specially set up for me, and predict the next word that I'm going to write, you need way less data to train that if you start with these encodings that are trained on all the data ever, because they're kind of bringing what it's learned, what these words mean, and then we only need a little bit more to train it to do specific tasks, like predict what I'm going to say next. So that's interesting. That was a little bit long and a little bit confusing. We might cut most of that out, but thanks for listening.
Wait, what were you explaining?
I was explaining how computers can understand words.
And so how is that different from how it is? Because you were saying before that it was different before, like in terms of how we used to actually predict language.
Do you mean when I was talking about having it as one vector with a 1 and a 0 everywhere else, or one hot vector?
But is that like in terms of like the neural networks and capabilities you have now, is that different from previous approaches?
Well, the difference is you kind of got an extra pre-trained layer in these neural networks because you've got these embeddings, they're called word embeddings, these vectors, that is already representative of what the word means. So if you're trying to train a network without these embeddings, you won't do as well because you haven't got as much data for the task that you're trying to train. This is kind of a sneaky way of getting all the language that's ever been written, using it to encode the meaning of the word, and then later when you want to train something else, you can start. Your starting position is you already have the meaning of the words, rather than your starting position is nothing. So it's like a little extra starting step. And that way, if you're training something without the things, you need a much bigger data set to get useful results, and you need to train it for much longer. Does that make sense?
Yeah, is this technology I guess accessible? Like having these pre-trained systems, can you access that at the moment using open source technologies, or is it something that's a bit difficult to use?
I'm pretty sure you can download a dictionary of all the word embeddings and use that to train as a starting point to train your own systems. Yeah, I think there's a couple of open source projects that are pretty nice.
Can I wear your jacket?
If you want. All right. Very good. All right, let's go to Reuben now. A bit of a change of pace here.
What's that?
This is going to take us from the 21st century all the way back to the early 21st century.
Yeah. Double denim. No. Hey guys, I'm doing the history segment. This week I'm going to talk about Spartacus, which happened around 70 BC. It's quite interesting. I just kind of read up on this on Wikipedia this afternoon, so don't quote me on any of this, but it's just a fun little story. Which has, inspired many a slave revolt and revolutionary theorist since, which I think is quite cool. So, I don't know, obviously, this story is from 2,000 years ago, so, I think a fair bit of it is true, but also it's been, but there's no way to tell how much of it is true because it's from 2,000 years ago, so, it's not really concrete fact. But anyway, I'm going to tell the kind of most retold story as it's told by Plutarch and Appian, which were kind of two historians who lived a few hundred years after it happened. Based their accounts
I love that there's ancient historians.
Yeah,
telling their history that's way closer to them than it is to us.
How ridiculous is that? Like, right? Like, and to these historians, you know, it's like 200 or 300 years after it happened. Like, they would have had to work so hard to like get this info, you know, and then record it, and then we're basing it off of that, and it still probably isn't a super accurate account. But anyway. So this is, Wikipedia mostly cites Plutarch and Appian, and I read a bit of their histories too. Anyway, so let's start. The story of Spartacus. It's the story of a slave revolt, set in, I think it's look, everyone's free to correct me on this at any time. It's not Pompeii, but it's one of the towns around Mount Vesuvius. Spartacus was a gladiator who was a disgraced Roman soldier. He deserted, I think, in Gaul. Don't quote me on this. He deserted in Gaul, was recaptured, made to work as a slave. After displays of his strength and fighting ability, he was turned into a gladiator, much like Russell Crowe.
Yeah, I was going to say, is this Russell Crowe?
It's not.
This is what happens to Russell Crowe.
Exactly. I think elements are taken from Spartacus, but the Russell Crowe one's a bit different. But anyway, so this dude Spartacus, he's a slave, fighting in an original Roman city, being a gladiator. Him and a bunch of other gladiators, including... Crixus and Onesimus. So there's about 50 gladiators, including Crixus and Onesimus, who collectively... sorry, I was checking my email there, folks.
Why are you checking your email in the middle of the story?
I'm sorry. Anyway, there's a collection of about 50 gladiators who collectively decide, like, fuck this, we're strong enough to break out of this gladiatorial prison and try to essentially free ourselves. And there's historical debate as to whether they were, because, well, in the 1960 movie and in other accounts, it's kind of put forward that Spartacus was trying to dismantle the whole Roman political system and like abolish slavery, and that's kind of how people like Marx and other like revolutionary, like that's how people see him. But probably, he was just trying to get out and escape back to his homeland or wherever he came from. So anyway, this group of about 50 gladiators arm themselves with kitchen utensils from the slave cookhouse.
Oh, they shouldn't have given them like big knives.
Yeah, but then
that was a bad move.
They get big knives and big forks and big, spit roast things that they use as spears, and they.
Well, they're farmers. That's why they have pitchforks. Yeah, these guys weren't farmers, but they had all these weapons because they were gladiators.
They had all these weapons, so they used gladiatorial weapons and kitchen things, and they fought their way out of the slave compound.
Oh man, you'd be pissed if there were like 5 gladiatorial weapons and like 10 of you, and you're like, oh, I'll just hold this spoon.
Yeah, I think literally some of them did that.
Oh, I would have been so upset.
Yeah,
to have the big.
They'll
pull your eyes out.
Imagine, just a ruthless cunt. Like,
actually, you might want to have the spoon because then you got an excuse. Oh, I'll just stay at the back of the fighting. Oh, I've only got a spoon.
I was about it. I didn't take my suit.
I'm not part of this revolt.
I had some pudding and I was on a long journey.
Guys, sit down. Stop revolting.
But yeah, so they fought their way out of the slave compound with kitchen equipment, literally, and then a town guard was sent after them further down the road.
Don't take on all that.
Okay.
Don't take on all the gladiators. It's the first day. Oh, that'd be a nice way to get in the deep end, eh?
Come on, Oxidus, just go after them. Oh, okay. No, they sent a collection of guards, and they fucked them as well, Spartacus and all the rest, and they walked up to a base on Mount Vesuvius and camped out there. So there's about 50 gladiators at this point, right? And a few others, as they walked out of town, a few other slaves had followed them. So they probably, had like 100, 200 people. Anyway, the interesting thing about the time they did it was the perfect timing, right? So half of the Roman army was away in Spain fighting a revolt, and the other half was in, I don't know, what would now be like Turkey and Iran. Like, they were fighting the Mithridatic Wars against King Mithridates. So pretty much Rome was on hold. They were occupied. All their army was overseas. So the kind of skeleton crew that were holding on to Rome were kind of like, oh fuck, like there's a small slave revolt. We'll just send like this consular police force down there to Mount Vesuvius to deal with them. And this is pre-Pompeii, by the way, so people are pretty chill about Mount Vesuvius. As
just gargle sometimes.
Yeah, just like whatever. But anyway, so they're like, we'll send this consular guard down to Mount Vesuvius, and we'll just get rid of them, and that'll be the end of it. So they send I don't know how many people it was. It was probably 1,000 guys down to Mount Vesuvius to walk up the mountain, and they thought they were going to like starve out Spartacus's camp and then invade them. Spartacus knew they were coming somehow. Like, this is true. Well, true Wikipedia true. Spartacus and his men, in preparation for the consular guard from Rome coming to apprehend them, got several vines from around where they were staying and made ropes, and then made these like belaying systems down the cliffside of the volcano, and his whole army abseiled down the side of the volcano, came around behind the Roman camp while they were sleeping and massacred them during the night.
They're supposed to guard?
Well, I think they killed the guards.
And also, planning, they're supposed to.
Like, literally, you're coming from Rome, you're like a rich royal dude, and you're like, oh, some gladiators got out, we'll literally just surround them on the mountain. Like, you're not expecting them to abseil around the other side of the mountain.
Yeah, you're expecting them to fight like one at a time in a ring.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
That's the only way they know. You're expecting some Russell Crowe shit. But
no, that's crazy, they abseil.
They abseil. So,
was it normal to abseil them, or were they like,
man,
I've got this crazy idea. Let's jump off the side of the mountain.
Who's got a GoPro? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, so that's crazy, right? And they did this. They killed all this guard that had been sent from Rome to kill them. And then suddenly, people around the area of Mount Vesuvius, which was kind of that's a region of Rome, Can't remember what it's called. It has a name.
Pompeii.
No, it's not Pompeii. Pompeii's a town, but that whole area is very fertile.
Greater Pompeii.
Yeah, let's go with Greater Pompeii. A lot of farmers and herdsmen and slaves from Greater Pompeii heard about this victory, which is, fairly unprecedented.
Yeah.
And then Spartacus' army swelled to 70,000.
Jesus.
70,000 people came, and they were like, right, like, fucking, it's on, like, no more slavery, let's fucking do this. So...
They weren't all slaves then, they were like some serfs and that sort of thing?
Yeah, serfs and farmers.
Yeah. Who didn't own slaves.
Who didn't own slaves.
Yeah.
And they came to this this meeting point around Mount Vesuvius, and I'm pretty sure Rome sent one more kind of effort. Like, there's one more group of about 10,000 soldiers, like a serious military attack against them, and they defeated them, which was, again, much to the surprise of the Roman government. They were just like, what the fuck? And then it went to winter, right? And the kind of winter's like off-season for campaigning, right? So they're like, fuck that, we're not going to try and get anybody in winter. But then Spartacus used the winter to train these 70,000 men, and he took them from farmers to, like, minor soldiers, right?
Like proper militia.
Exactly. He set up a training thing. And also, obviously, like, the gladiator, they were gladiators and they were fighting for freedom and all that, but they were a bit fucked. And so they were raiding these other towns, and they started raiding towns and conquering towns around Greater Pompeii. And they set up this, tiny little militia kingdom where they could take supplies from towns, from farming towns. So it's a, rich farming area and whatever. And anyway, so Spartacus is starting this little empire along with his other mates. And Rome goes, holy shit. So they charge the richest man in Rome, Crassus, who's a member of the first triumvirate, which includes Julius Caesar.
Oh, this is that time. I thought this was before that.
This is crazy. Like, there's about 200 years in the Roman Republic where for some reason, like, all the shit goes down and everything is amazing. But anyway, so Crassus, right?
Yeah, I've heard of Crassus.
Crassus, and this is before the whole Julius Caesar Pompey thing, right? So they go, Crassus, you the man, can you go take care of Spartacus? And Crassus is like, righto. They give him charge of 8 legions.
How many people in a legion?
You know what? I can't remember. It's a fuckload.
Like it's 1,000 or 10,000 or 100.
It's closer to 10,000.
Closer to 10,000.
Like,
it's a lot of people.
It's a lot of motherfuckers. Like, yeah. So Crassus has control of his whole army. Spartacus has started to move north and then has been pushed south. So Spartacus is heading towards Sicily, which is probably a bad move.
Crassus, the mafia will get it.
Yeah, the mafia, exactly. Yeah.
We might have to cut that one.
Yeah.
They'll get me too.
They'll get me. They want to get to me because I know the secret of pasta code. Marlon Brando.
That was a Marlon Brando impression. That was the shittest one I've ever heard.
I did Marlon Brando. Marlon Brando.
No, that's just something.
Come for a cup of coffee. On the day of my daughter's wedding. Sorry. Anyway.
Tell us the rest of the story.
Marlon Brando is like the mum.
To yours, Leo. No, Johnny John.
Wait, no. I'll do your impression.
No, Johnny John. Yeah, that's the impression. That's what I said. Yeah. No, I won't cut you off. Sorry. Yeah. So they're going to Sicily. They're going to have a holiday in Sicily.
So they're heading towards Sicily. Heading towards Sicily. As they get towards Sicily, they're heading south through beautiful southern Italy, and
Sounds like American.
Crassus stations 6 legions across. It's Italian American. It is what it is. Anyway,
It's a New Jersey kind of accent.
it's New Jersey, exactly. Great, Jersey boys. Anyway, Crassus stations these 6 legions across the middle of Italy, like a chokehold on Italy, and he stations these 2 legions in the south. There are a few skirmishes where Spartacus sometimes wins, but mostly loses, which is sad. And then Spartacus Spartacus gets to the Messina Strait, which is between Sicily and mainland Italy, and he goes, full ice cream. Yes, Messina, our sponsor. Spartacus goes, oh shit, we're on the southern tip of Italy, they've fucking got us, we're going to sail Sicily and start a slave revolt and hopefully get more reinforcements. So he makes a deal with these pirates to carry him across. Little does he know, the pirates are in league with Crassus, and they abandon him. So he's stuck on the end of mainland Sicily. He's like, oh shit, he's got like 2,000 men. There's other groups scattered around Italy, but they're starting to be split up now. So then, do you know Pompey?
No.
Okay, so Pompey is Caesar's greatest rival. He's kind of the other big cheese in Rome at this point. Pompey has just come back from the Hispanic Wars, where there was a rebellion in the Spanish Roman colonies. Pompey's just come over, and he's gone, hey, Crassus, I'll help out. And, Crassus is like, oh, fuck this guy. He's going to, take the credit. You know what I mean? He's like, oh, I do need the reinforcements, but also I know Pompey, he's going to take the credit if he does this thing. So, Crassus and Spartacus start to negotiate. They start going okay, blah, 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 let us across and then you'll get the victory and whatever. But then Crassus suddenly disagrees. Then Pompey brings in his armies with Crassus, and they just kind of crush the last of Spartacus' rebellion. And yeah, effectively, that's the end of Spartacus' rebellion. They keep 6,000 slave rebel survivors alive, and they string them all up in the Appian Way, which leads from Capua, which is in the south of Italy, to Rome. Is this Mozio? So there's 6,000 survivors of this big coup. They string them all up between Rome and Capua in the Appian Way, and they crucify all of them.
Oh, geez.
And then Pompey mostly gets the credit for the slaying of Spartacus, and that's part of his, the credit and the kudos he gains in Parliament. I just breathed in the whole. Anyway, that's my story of Spartacus, who has remained a symbol of, revolution, freedom forever.
But he failed, didn't he?
He did fail.
That sucks.
But one of the main leaders in the Haitian Revolution, I can't remember his name. It is on Wikipedia somewhere. But one of the big cheeses in the Haitian Revolution is called Black Spartacus. One of the people who started the Bavarian Illuminati is he calls himself Spartacus. There's a lot of sporting teams called the Spartans in honor of Spartacus, not Sparta.
Yeah, the Haitian Revolution.
The Haitian Revolution. The Haitian Revolution.
That was the only one that was successful for more than 50 years or something. It was the only one that was successful ever, and it lasted a while.
And it's still going.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Well, the Cuban one's a bit different, I think, because the Haitian one is completely slave run, isn't it?
Yeah. Apparently, the reason that was the only one that was successful is that they didn't turn all military and try to start invading other people, and they let the farmers who were being awful to them, the awful slave owners, they didn't kill them all,
yeah.
Which means that they kept the knowledge to make food, which means they didn't all die, which was a clever move.
Yeah.
But you can understand why it'd be really tempting if you're a slave and you escape, and they were just torturing you for your entire life, and you're like, fuck, I'm going to kill these people. But they managed to not do it, which meant that they kept the knowledge to make food.
No way to revolt against earthquakes.
Of all the revolts. Now it's Johnny John's time to do their segment.
Yeah.
Mystery person, mystery gender.
So I thought I'd stay on the Italian theme because we're talking about it. And
I don't think we got so much pasta.
yeah.
Is that the mystery thing of this week? You've been pushing it hard and it hardly bends.
Pasta does come in this thing sometimes. If you're creative.
I mean, you could put pasta in it, but it would probably fall out the bottom.
Yeah.
Oh,
Did
Reuben's.
you ever see that?
Poking me with it.
April Fool's joke where the ABC did a thing where they they, I like the Venice that was big culture, and they basically had a segment on where pasta comes from. And it was like a pasta tree. And,
Tree.
they were growing, and they went into the farmers, and they were like, oh, like how's the pasta going? And they're like, oh yeah, it's been pretty tough. We're taking a drought. We're not getting as much yield as before. They just knocked all this pasta on this tree. They like
Just threw it over a tree.
I was like, I think I'm thinking about that.
No, because I have seen that one. That was an old one, wasn't it? It was black and white, wasn't it? Yeah.
They've got to do it.
I love the old pranks.
See how many types of food tree.
Yeah, no. Pranks are good. Pranks.
So I was thinking. So today I did a talk, and one of the topics I discussed was about. It was talking about Venice and the history of Venice. This talk was sort of about blockchain and distributed systems, and I thought I discovered this really interesting thing when I went to Venice not too long ago. You can basically go to this place called the Piazza del San Marco, and it's this old sort of palace senate thing where all the government of Venice, did all of their parliaments and did everything.
This is from your Republic of Venice.
Yeah. So in Venice, you can go and visit this place. And it's like a very iconic tourist attraction. And you can do this secret tour of the palace, and it's a very interesting tour because you have to go and explore all these old cavernous rooms and these political prisons that people were kept in, and you actually get to go into the one prison cell where Casanova was imprisoned. And so it's quite.
Casanova a real person.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he wrote a lot of books, but obviously he's well known for his his Venetian exploits. And so he got into a bit of trouble, and he got put in a political prison in his palace. But there's actually quite a difference between the cells. You get to walk into sort of underground cells, and they're just because Venice obviously it's very low, and it used to flood. You get these rooms filled up with water, and they're completely dark. So the prisoners would have to sit there in the wet, in the middle of winter, and it would be horrible conditions.
Like I lived in the bath the other day.
What?
It's pretty much exactly.
Yeah, just like that.
Elliot in the bus, what happened?
You just told us like an hour ago.
Oh no, Kate Nazi. I see what you mean.
Ah, yeah.
What, 6 people in the month?
Just is that like in this prison?
Pretty much, except less coconut oil.
I'm sorry for making light of these prisoners. They're probably my ancestors. They're probably all of our
Yeah, I'm
ancestors.
Italian, so pretty sure I'm related to these people.
I mean, it was what 1,000 years ago.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
what
between-
a trillion ancestors you had 1,000 years ago. Odds are, if you got any
Very
European in
good
you at all,
maths.
like, yeah. So it's 2 to the power of how many generations?
So the Venetian Republic.
Okay, sorry, yeah, go on.
Yeah, go on.
Oh, so the Venetian, So the Venetian Republic was an interesting thing. I don't know too much about history, but basically it existed for over 1,000 years, from I think it was the 7th or 8th century until the 16th or 17th century. So which is an extremely long time for a country to continue that. But
Yeah, normally the people die.
yeah, I mean, if you think, even
Yeah.
look at democracy since the French Revolution, that's only a couple of years. Really. When you compare that to over a millennia, in a place as small as Venice, which is tiny, you can walk around Venice in a couple of hours.
So it was the same like system that whole time. It wasn't like with the Romans where they kind of flipped it a couple times.
Yeah, I think it probably changed it to some extent, but it was still
Like a continuous line.
there was
It's like the Beatles, same thing.
sort of, yeah. Pretty much
Gradual
just like-
shift to
Psychedelic.
Yeah.
A lot of acid of different types.
Am I allowed to have another beer? Sorry, you're not my parents.
yeah, have another beer.
Go for it.
I still need to transfer you for that.
I just put half of my beer on half of it.
So you can splash your beer on my car.
So
So
where were
like.
we?
You can make anything sexually.
You sound like my
mom. I know.
Sexual innuendos,
No, she just says that.
In your
She wants
endos.
to live at home.
Oh, it's because she wants you at home.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's much
There's
cuter.
nothing
and more
sexual
innocent.
about it, guys.
Yeah.
So on the topic of love.
Bringing it back. Oh, I love my mum too.
I think we love her in different ways.
What? That's not true. Yeah.
I told you about my mum, didn't I?
What?
One of my mates.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say this on the podcast. She's married again now. So I don't know if she's told her current husband.
I met your mum once. When,
Oh, yeah?
When we were living in the same place, and we did an interview, and he's on Skype.
Oh, yeah,
and,
sure.
and then she walks in the back, you're sort of sitting there doing Skype interview. She walks in with like a monster's mask, and just like
Yeah.
walks in behind the scenes, and Luke doesn't even realize. And he's trying to be serious and answer these questions.
Yeah.
And his mum's like,
I was so
You
nervous
can't
for
see
the
the movie,
interview
but
because
for the recorders.
I was a kid. I was 17 when I did that. I fell asleep through the interview and I put on makeup and I told you I was sick. And then you were so nice. You let me do the video interview. And so I was like, oh shit, I have to look sick. Oh. I can't say I'm putting makeup on to look sick. I was like, oh yeah, sorry, I couldn't make it. Sorry. Yeah, tell us about the Venetian wines.
Oh, I'm running a huge empire with several complex ties.
So when you say take care of him, do you mean like kill him or take care of him?
Give him a hug.
Because that went really well with your niece that last week.
Shoot it.
I just thought I'd better clarify after what happened to Denise. Yeah, sorry. Go on, Johnny John.
So we're walking through the cavernous sort of tunnels of this secret palace, the secret side of us. And it's very interesting because you've got these like hidden floors which are on the palace where they created almost like a Harry Potter floor, which you had to sort of crouch down.
This is real.
This is real, yeah. I mean, and sort of learned about it.
You didn't just dream it.
Yeah, maybe it was all made up, but maybe it's all a secret.
Yeah. Wait, so there are different layers.
Yeah.
Floors.
Yeah, so you have these, and the reason I did it is because they have these very large windows, and they put these floors in place so people would think that they were real floors, and they thought. So they were hidden in the palace so people would suspect, they're doing something secretive.
Right.
They thought they just had really high ceilings because the windows were so big. And,
That's clever.
so anyway, you go up to the top of this building, and there's a little room. It's called I think it's called the Secret Chain City or something.
What?
It's a pretty cool name. And it was in obviously in time it was translated. But they've you had this interesting situation, like political system. The way it worked is you had the Doge, who was a king, and the Doge had this sort of secret Doge, who was this chancellor guy, who would sit behind
The Doge and the secret Doge.
Yeah, and it's funny because I sort of see this parallel with like sort of blockchain things and where Dogecoin comes from. I think it's all linked. I think
Dogecoin really Dogecoin, the dog?
It's the dog, yeah. Maybe it wasn't about that. Maybe it was
So does the secret Doge have another secret Doge? And it's like a big long never-ending line of secret Doges.
Absolutely. This is exactly what he did. So him or her, we didn't know because every time
Because it's a
the
secret.
Doge appeared, they had to wear a mask. And so and then, in Venice everyone wears a mask all the time. This guy had to wear
They're all ugly.
all the time.
Sorry if you're
And
Venetian.
it was- so he would appear in front of the other Doge, but no one knew who he was. And so his responsibility was to really take really secretive documents like treaties and contracts and agreements and all the documents. I don't even know what documents because they're so secret. It could have been like descriptions of aliens and everything. You had records of at that time, and he would then use these really interesting systems that I think represent both distributed systems today and encryption. So what he did is cut up these documents and create little sections of them, and then he would get different members of the public to come and work in periodic ways. So they would come and work for a couple of months, and they would only be able to work months at this place. And they wouldn't be able to talk about what they do. They would be given certain responsibilities, but not able to know too much about what's going on. And then he would employ other people who were artists, so he didn't have any literacy skills, so they couldn't move around. And they would have to get these little documents and then copy them. Using
Oh, they
their
just
artistic
look
skills.
and they try to
They
copy
just
the.
look
the
at them
symbols.
and then just
Really?
copy the letters. So
And they couldn't that's
they had no idea
nuts.
what's going on. So they're just reading them, copying them, and getting this information. And then what would happen is they would move these things around, and the different people would have these little emblems. They have little special emblems that they'd make up of moon, sun, and all these random objects and symbols. And they would then, have the responsibility of moving these things all around the city, so that they would distribute the information. And I think it would have been important because, well, if someone got their hands on the documents, it's one thing. But say Venice got invaded, and someone destroyed the palace or burnt it down, and did burn down at one point. They would, by having this redundancy control, they would protect themselves against the vulnerabilities that exist.
Sorry, I know this is a really dumb question, but was Venice a city-state or part of Italy at this point?
It wasn't part of it. It was its own state.
Yeah.
So I think the unification happened much later.
Okay, sorry, go on.
But I don't know the exact. They definitely had alliances with him, but I don't think they were part of it, because it was extending for a long period of time. So yeah, they would have had pretty important alliances, and probably some regions of it at the time. But basically they would use. I think it's a very interesting parallel to talk about. These new types of technologies you look at, say, distributed systems or cloud computing, it operates in the same way. You have redundancy protection. You have things spread out all over the place. So if you knock down one bit of it, then you can always get it back. You can go and find another part and put the pieces back together and then have that information represented. And encryption, I think this is a really interesting form of encryption. You know, they're used in a quite a creative way. You know, today we use it for a lot of other things. But I just think it's interesting to see the parallels with what we're trying to do with some new technologies today. I don't think it's new. That when you see these historic trends that occur, you can start to put it more in perspective and see, you know, what potential is and where we've come from. Yeah.
Yeah, 666.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a thing about distributed sort of systems. That was a big problem. Not even just distributed, just early on in computers, back when we were using analog computers in like the 50s, 40s, and 50s. It used to be the case. Digital computers sucked because let's say you to transfer a message like they're doing that writing thing, and then occasionally they're going to get one of the letters wrong. If you get a letter wrong in a digital computer, it breaks the whole program. So you can't have it get wrong. But the technology, and even today's technology, is only accurate to say 99.999%, which means that every time you run a program, there's a say 1 in 10,000 chance that one of these bits is going to be flipped just because of physics the wrong way. So that totally ruins how much data you can send. It breaks everything. And so people are trying to work out how they could possibly get around this. How could they make it super precise? You know, so it's not 1 in 10,000, it's 1 in 100 million. Then it might be okay as long as you don't build 2 big programs. And the solution wasn't thought of for a couple of years until it was published. And it's very simple. It's a very good solution to this problem of copying without degradation. Do you know what it is? You just send it twice. You just keep sending it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So if there's a 1 in 10, let's say there's a 1 in 3 chance that every single bit you send is going to be wrong. If you send that sequence of bits twice, then there's half that chance. So you just send it 100,000 times, and then there's a tiny little chance. So you just do it you just send it however many times you need until you've got the level of confidence that you require for whatever the program is. Yeah.
I'd love to read that paper. It's like,
it would have been so smart.
Send shit more. It would probably get there.
Yeah, as long as the error is random. Yeah.
That's blasphemous. Scientific really
as long as it's not
way to go, just keep doing it.
Tried it before, mate. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thought I wouldn't get before in it, but I kept trying. Eventually got there. I just got 100 points, just like chucking it.
Yeah, eventually it was
Just that
very
like
hard. I think we've reached the our main course for this evening, which is to talk about our topic. You know, we do these topics at the end. They never really last as long as we think they're going to.
What's the topic?
The topic is
right?
if we have brain-computer interfaces, but like really good brain-computer interfaces where you can connect your thoughts to a computer and to anyone else that has a brain-computer interface. How might that work? What would the world be like if we invented that without actually any other technologies changing? And how long in the future do you think that sort of thing is?
So what's a brain-computer interface?
Loosely, it's just saying that a way of connecting the computation that goes on inside your head with the computation that goes on inside computers.
Yep.
So we have brain-computer interfaces today, which do things like, you stick an electrode in your brain in a certain region, and you turn it on and off, and it stops you from shaking if you've got bad Parkinson's.
Yeah.
That's connected to a computer. That's your brain directly connected to the computer. And in that case, the computer controls your brain, and you can control the computer. So it's a nice little cycle. But yeah, in the case I'm talking about, it's as if you could transfer actual sort of thoughts and information. The best proposal to do this so far was published a couple of years ago. It's not possible yet, engineering-wise, but it's theoretically possible. Which is if you had tiny little nanobots, and all they have to do is you could have 2 types of one type. They need to be able to read if a neuron is firing or not, and they have to be able to stimulate a neuron to fire or prevent it from firing.
Yep.
So it'd be like attaching extra neurons to your head. So you would inject those into your bloodstream, either as nanobots or as a kind of mesh, as a web, like a net that would wrap around your whole brain.
I think on nanobots, like, I've heard about nanobots before, I'm not sure. Are they actually robots, or are they just like some sort of organic thing? What is it?
It is, I think, broadly defined as any technology that operates at a nanoscale. That's 10 to the negative 9 meters. Very, very, very small.
Does that mean microscopic?
Microscopic is 10 to the negative 6. That has its own sort of definition.
Oh, no. So it's smaller than that.
It's 1,000 times smaller than microscopic. Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah. So it's
what are they making these things in? Like, are they like
Well, at the moment we don't have nanobots. The things that operate on a nanoscale today, we have are transistors at a nanoscale. They're still at a microscale. I think they might be at a nanoscale, transistors in computers, which is sort of the level where you have to kind of worry about electrons just jumping to the other side because of how electrons work. What else do we have at nanoscale? I think carbon nanotubes are at a nanoscale. Those are things we're building. Yeah, it's just like very, very small. I think nanobot specifically refers to artificial things, so it wouldn't count if you engineered a virus to do it. Although you could do it it might be possible, the technology might end up using a virus to actually do this. I don't know. But yeah, talking about connecting brains to computers. So you have, in the scenario that this paper put out, is if you had these nanobots inside your brain, and they would just float through your brain and connect to neurons, and then just sit there attached to these neurons, and they would be activated because they can't hold their own internal power source. They would be activated by a kind of sheath that you'd put over your whole brain on the outside. So that would be okay because it wouldn't actually plug into your neurons and damage them. You would just like open up your skull and then put this sheath underneath your skull but on top of your brain so it doesn't damage your brain too much. And that would power and receive signals from the nanobots, amplify it, and then send the signals out to your thinking cap, which would just be a hat you wore, which had a proper computer in it, and which would charge the sheath. So it's like a 3-layer system. And once you got it outside your brain, you can make it as big as you like. And just use the computers as
actually happen. Like, you can cut up your head and you put a sheath on it. Like, what's the point of having it sitting on top? Like, is that really going to help you anymore?
The skull would protect you from getting poked in the brain. I suppose, but they cut off people's skulls today, and they do stuff with their brain. Every time they cut out a tumor, or every time they do an operation for epilepsy, or things like that, they put the skull back because it's very good at stopping you from getting hurt. Like, there is a function to your skull. You don't have to wear a helmet your whole life.
Yeah.
Especially if you only cut out a little square. So you got like this square and there's just brain there. That wouldn't be very sanitary.
It's like the thing that this sort of fashion trends that we're kind of, when you start having these sheets and these battery types.
People would get like eyeball sheets and stuff. Yeah.
I mean, it might be very small. It might just be something in your glasses or behind your ear. You might not even need it if they can make the one inside your head strong enough and big enough. We want to talk about what do you think the world would be like if you could have your brain directly connected to computers? What's your thoughts on that, Reuben?
Well, it would probably require like kind of that. I don't know what the form of knowledge is, but that like I guess the form of knowledge where you can retain a lot of facts, like people or like academics in certain fields who are renowned for just their encyclopedic knowledge or something. So let's call it encyclopedic knowledge. That would become redundant, right? Because every computer that has a database has encyclopedic knowledge. So if anyone could access that instantly, it would probably make a lot of academics in certain fields redundant, because I feel like a lot of academic fields employ people. Sorry, I'm drunk by this point, but a lot of academic fields employ people. Sorry.
They do employ people.
Okay, so there are academics in certain fields where you're not employed because the computing of the information is hard, or you're not employed because it's like you're employed to know a lot, right? You're not employed to think hard. You know what I mean?
Like being an SME is subject matter expert.
Yeah, they your business. Look at this one over here with a business suit with his SMEs and his synergy.
No, but exactly. Subject matter experts will become
It's not a very precise term though, because subject matter could be anything.
Exactly.
No, but this is what I mean. So if
Then
you're
why add the SM? Just say you're an expert.
no, but say you're
not an expert in anything. We don't have one specific thing.
say you're a subject matter expert, right? If you could access that amount of encyclopedic knowledge instantly in a way that really took years to absorb normally in the human brain, then I think a lot of academic fields would be compartmentalized, and you'd probably end up being able to think of a lot of new inventions and cures and solutions or whatever. I'm saying that in quotation marks. A lot quicker, because you'd be able to simultaneously incorporate a lot of fields of thought, because you can instantly access these encyclopedic knowledge things. And that's probably a lot of what's holding back intellectual progression at the moment, is the barrier of communication between two people who are both experts in different things. But if you can access the expertise, which is years of built up knowledge and this. Yeah, sorry, that's my thought. Computation would just accelerate human advancement, which is pretty basic, actually.
No, I get what you're saying though. I think it would actually be really. I reckon that's one of the more difficult things that would be from a technology point to actually make happen.
Right.
I think it would be easier just to extend your thinking, as if you plug in like an external neural network that doesn't have this information in it,
And just goes a bit faster.
Well, it'd be like you could train it yourself with your thoughts or whatever input you put into it.
Yeah.
But I think it would be actually pretty hard to get facts into your brain, because you would need to have the computing layer would have to be able to convert the facts to a specific firing of its connections to your neurons that makes you perceive the fact, which would be really tricky to get right, because your brain would be different to everyone else's. So it'd have to learn it specifically for your brain, Reuben, what the tree is green, what a red car is, and I have to learn what specific order of neurons firing gives you the thought
Of a red car.
of a red car. So I'd have to put that in. I think in the shorter term, it's more likely that if you could just attach like an artificial neural network to some subset of neurons that you have, it could almost extend your thinking without just adding more facts in. You would try to simulate extra neurons. So it'd be like adding extra neurons to your brain, but they wouldn't be trained yet. It'd be like you got a baby's brain grafted, and you got an extra bit of space to store facts if you learn them the normal way, and extra space to do your thinking processing if you can get these artificial neurons working like real neurons and attached to your brain in enough places.
So you could just sit there and like watch non-stop YouTube videos about some topic and just retain absolutely everything.
Yeah, maybe. I think in the shorter term it would start by as if you had how many more neurons inside your hand that weren't actually set up to do anything yet. In the longer term, what Reuben's saying would totally be possible though. So that wasn't. I was just trying to put an ordering of how I thought the tech would work, with Reuben's one being later. What do you reckon there?
It's an interesting. Like, what it means to have increased brain power? That question is interesting. When we're talking
Speak up.
when we're talking about what it means to have extra brain power, it's a interesting question in that what we do with our brain when we're talking about emotions. A lot of our perception is emotional, and we don't retain facts, we retain experiences and things. So I think it would be an interesting way of, and I think I was reading about Facebook and what they've got this whole secret thing called Building 8. I think, have you heard about this?
I've heard of that, yeah.
So it's like a compound where they're doing this research and having sort of like Google's moonshot project, and there's some suspicion that they might be working on some sort of augmented reality experiential technology that sort of plugs into your brain. And I guess their vision of that, what Facebook's all about is how do you share emotional experiences with each other, so it connects people in different ways socially. And so that's how
they would say businessy. They're going to plug into your brain and read your thoughts. We're sharing experiences.
Share your experiences. Like intimate thoughts. Like, I responded emotionally to this event. Here, I'm posting it on Instagram. You can go in and you can check out how I felt. I just love this
cool
concept.
would it be if you could record your memories and I could feel them like a movie?
And you just
That would
sit
be
there with
so
conversation.
amazing.
Like, remember that time I had the best experience? You're like, check it out. Try this.
They're like, I'm plugging it in my head, and I would feel like I'm there. What would it be like to remember someone else's memories?
I know.
Would it feel like you're doing it? It must, if that's encoded as part of the memory.
It would have to be. And so then we just start to doubt whether anything you did was
really you.
Because someone could come in at night and just plug in a bunch of memories.
And then you would think that you did them, even though you didn't.
So
mate, that's terrifying.
And then you'd be so smart that you'd have some sort of existential crisis. Because
because you got the extra.
Sartre or something. And would you become some nice?
I love the idea of being able to share memories with people or like download experiences. But I want to know when that experience is one that I've downloaded versus one I've had myself. Blurring that line is so freaky to me.
Well, I guess the next step is going, well, if you have this sort of thing, it becomes very mental, the idea of sort of simulating reality. As soon as you start to implement memories and start to add emotions to your thing that you've never experienced.
Yeah, they don't even have to be someone else's real memories. They could just be synthesized memories.
Yeah. So you could be just upload. But the thing is about like I was reading about how you would actually do this and uploading your consciousness. And this is something that's been explored in a couple of different sci-fi things and TV shows and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I guess that's another part of human brain interface, or like computer brain connectivity. Being able to upload consciousness, like simulate your entire brain to the extent that you could basically replicate every experience you've ever had and upload that into some system. And then that system would essentially be like you. And it would be at the same point in time that you upload your consciousness. But you would never know that your consciousness is uploaded. And you could put it to some sort of medium. You could be, you know.
Well, yeah, suppose that you're really old and you're about to die, and you're like, fuck it, I'm going to take the risk uploading my consciousness. So, oh man, think about this scenario. So you plug yourself in and it makes a copy of your brain in a non-destructive way. So you're still there in the bed, but you've uploaded your consciousness. And you're kind of hoping, because there's one of you, and then you split, and there's two of you, and you're hoping that you're going to be the one on the computer that's going to live forever. But you're not. You do it, and there's like, the computer goes, aha, I'm here, I made it, aha, and then runs off. And then you're stuck in the bed still, and you're like, what are you going to do? Well, you do it again. Like, you've got another 50% chance of being in the computer.
Because you never had the experience of changing.
Yeah. Well, because you want to be the version of you that's on the computer.
Yeah.
And if it's making a copy of you every time, only half of the copies, well, all of the copies of you, the original you, is going to be not on the
Well,
computer.
you have to.
And eventually, but if you make the decision that I'm going to try and upload myself so I can stay on the computer, and then you're still in your body here, and there's a version of you that's having a great time on the computer, you're going to do it again, and again, and then you've only got a 1 in a billion chance to still be in your dying body, and 99,100,000 million, whatever it is, chance of being in the computer. But there's always going to be one copy of you that's still in this dying body. It's like, fuck, I'm going to die. Try to upload myself again. Another copy's made. Still not me. Fuck, upload myself again. Another copy's made. I'm still here. Fuck, another copy. And then there'll be so many copies of you on the computer. So many slightly different copies that are like half a second different, you know? They've had half a second different experience.
And then they'd all have some weird perceptive, I don't know, regret. Because if you were your consciousness without your body, you'd probably realize pretty soon, because you would have had to come to the conclusion of your consciousness. So you'd be like, right now I'm consciousness that's just floating around.
Yeah.
Like, and I can't do anything. I haven't got my body anymore. I'm just like,
you get a robot body?
and you don't know what to do. You start floating around. Unless you get put in a robot, some other body.
You might be pissed off if you're like the first one out of that billion copies. You're the first copy. You're like, I made it. All right, stop. And then there's another version. You're like, there's only one of me. There's another one. You're like, stop uploading more copies of this stuff.
Would they try to stop?
I wouldn't have done that, but of course it would have, because it's a copy.
So what do you guys think about it? So imagine we're here today, everything's the same, but you have a.
No, it's a question for you, Reuben.
So you have
You can go your. I'm sorry.
you could get connected to a computer that gives you like all this ability. What would you do? And like, or what do you think someone would do in today's world if they had
If you could connect to today's computers and you're able to use today's software, assuming.
No,
that you
let's
can
say like where we think it could go.
Okay.
In the future, but today.
Yeah. Without anything else changing. That's how we do when we talk about these techs, we're assuming that no other technology changes, because otherwise, it would just be us predicting the future every week, which won't be any different.
Yeah, I like this idea of like one variable.
Yeah. What would you do, Reuben, if you could connect your brain to a computer? Yeah.
I would learn. I would analyze like I guess stock. I would.
I'm gonna go be an accountant.
No. I wouldn't be an accountant. Sorry, guys.
I'm sorry, man.
I would analyze whatever it took for me to bring the major polluting energy companies down, and then I would figure out how to start off that domino effect that would cause them to collapse. Whether that's like influencing the stock market or like embezzling money or whatever.
Nice.
Whatever took down the major polluting energy companies, I'll do that.
You don't think there would be another way to sort of solve that problem? Like,
Nah, fuck them.
What about creating like a very, very compelling renewable energy solution?
that's what the
that would
answer
just
say. All right.
undermine their business proposition completely.
I mean, don't you think there's a
Super
very
intelligent, could you do a kind of
compelling?
carbon
I mean, maybe it depends. Like, I feel like there's already pretty compelling renewable energy things. Like, people are sticking to coal and gas because of habit and tradition and ties to friends and family, right? Aren't they? Well, I don't know. I don't know that much about it. You guys are probably more knowledgeable about this than me.
I think you're probably more knowledgeable on the environment side. Leah might be more knowledgeable on the businessy side. I might be more knowledgeable on the. What's my side? My predictions for the what technologies might be possible in the future. Maybe,
Sure.
because I'm in IT.
I guess what my knowledge points me towards is that it probably is worth sacrificing the death or suffering of a few thousand or million people for the eventual saving of the planet, because things are that urgent and we need to stop stuff that urgently. So the most immediate stop to any environmental degradation is probably necessary, which is why I would dismantle most energy companies immediately.
But what if we could all upload our consciousness?
Yeah, we don't need
Then we
anybody.
don't need it. We could just like live in pollution. You know,
Do you? But I mean, that depends on whether you care about yourself or the health of the earth.
But what's on the earth?
What's
What do
on
we
the
care
earth?
about? People and animals?
No,
Upload the applets.
the rest of life. Earth is a beautiful thing.
what about if we could upload bacteria?
Yeah, we upload every
Yeah.
living thing,
Bacteria
including plants.
If
Can you
you,
imagine uploading a plant?
if you could upload bacteria, but then
I'm sorry, I love
how-
the tree.
No. But
There's a tree looming over us, and it's kind of scaring me now that I insulted
I
it.
love
is
nature.
there worth, or is there worth in preservation of something if something doesn't have a consciousness? Like the worth of preserving something digitally is because it has a conscience and because it can keep on existing as a consciousness. But if it's just existing as an object within another consciousness, say a human consciousness, then does it have as much value as, well, that's an interesting philosophical question, isn't it?
I
But
don't
what
know,
about if we didn't know we were a simulation and we're in a virtual world, which we've uploaded everyone's consciousness? What is say there's like plants and stuff that within that ecosystem operate? Do they have the same value in a simulated consciousness if they are the same consciousness?
If they're a simulated version, I think they should have the same value.
Mm.
I think I should have the same value if I'm simulated on a brain or simulated on a computer.
Yeah.
Assuming that I'm still able to have experiences. I'm surprised at that sort of conclusion, Reuben, because you don't think that there's. It's going to be my
So what's your
big reveal.
What's your
Oh,
Well,
hang
on the
finish
climate
thought.
change thing, I'm not concerned about climate change at all. I think it's a minor issue. I think that the chance that it's going to have an impact on the world is I think the chance that it's going to be the most significant or in the top couple of most significant things is small, and the impact it can have before we solve the problem via technology is going to be kind of limited. Relative, like it's going to be a big problem. Millions of people are going to suffer because of it in the 10 or 20 years until we find a technological solution. But that's no bigger a problem than say the suffering that happens in North Korea right now, or the suffering that happens because of we haven't solved diseases, particular diseases. Like it's an issue on the global scale, but it's not nearly as big as I think a lot of people would push it to be.
But that's in terms of people, right?
In terms of impact,
But how are you measuring impact?
will it matter in X number of years? How many sentient beings does it affect over the lifetime of the universe? Yeah.
Won't it affect more sentient beings than North Korea or diseases?
Depends which lasts longer. I think that just like we can eventually find a solution to diseases and find a solution to shitty political regimes, we can find a solution to climate change. Not just in a sense that we can stop polluting and then live in whatever world's left, but literally reverse it. We know it's possible to reverse it because
I think in Germany they developed a system where you can basically suck in carbon.
Yeah.
And then prove the concept, and then they could use it to actually produce that. And so like if you could have an energy source that would be non-polluting and it would be powerful, say using some sort of hydro or like geothermal or something, or solar, and then you're able to run on a huge scale, it's like stuff sucking in carbon, and then you're able to create some value out of that. You could potentially reverse some aspects of, but I feel like we also have some. There's so many unknown effects that it could have.
Yeah, for sure.
You might suck all the carbon.
I got a deep freezing. No, I want to be clear that I definitely think that as on the path we are now, if there was no technology advancement, climate change would be the biggest issue.
Yeah.
I do think that because it's happening slow enough, and because we know it's theoretically possible for the Earth to be in a perfect climate, because it has been in the past, that eventually we'll develop technology to put it back in that state. You can argue about whether or not we won't develop technology if we end up in some dystopia because of climate change. But my timelines for us inventing basically every technology ever is the same timeline as us inventing artificial superintelligence, which I think will happen within minimum of 10, maximum of 50 years with 95% confidence. Which may... Yeah. Well, the prediction from Ray Kurzweil, who's been making the same prediction since like 1975, has been 2029. He hasn't changed it. He still thinks it's 2029.
Really?
And he's had some pretty good predictions of the future. Not amazing ones, but
Genome
Yeah, he predicted that very well.
Yeah.
It was like 7 years into the genome project, the
Yeah.
14-year project, something like that. Can't remember the exact. And they got 1% through, and he was like, perfect, 7 doublings away. It's been doubling every however many years. It's going to finish early. And people were like, man, they did 1% in half the time. And he was like, nah, it's solid. And he got that prediction very correct. We did finish early with the genome project. Well, not we. I wasn't even an adult then. But
Humans.
humans. I do love humans. Humans are way nicer than people think. Like, people kind of assume the world is shit. No, like, people kind of assume that humans are assholes, but they are really not. They're like really sweet, lost kind of things, I haven't met a human that's been an asshole since high school. And the asshole humans I knew in high school, I went back, I got bullied a lot when I was in like year 7 and 8, and I changed schools, and then I came back, and one of the biggest bullies was like, hey man, I was thinking, this is like year 10 or year 11, I was thinking about what I did when I was like, when we were kids, I'm really sorry, and I was like, oh, that is so sweet, dude. Like, that's just the kind of thing 13-year-olds do. It's like, humans are really nice. Like, 99.9% of humans are good. They're good beings.
I need to go. So.
You need to go?
I need to go to the toilet.
Oh, are you going to come back?
Maybe. Do you reckon it's going to rain tonight?
It's pretty cool.
Not for at least several hours.
I need to take my laptop at some point.
Well, come back and join our more speaking. We're not quite done. We're an hour and 20 minutes. Let's do another 15 minutes.
Okay. No, I don't want to do another
We
15
gotta
minutes.
think about dystopian.
Yeah, we haven't done the dystopian.
Do you guys?
It's okay. You don't have to.
Do you guys want to hold my laptop in the agreement? I just need to go to sleep. You guys want to hold my laptop in the agreement that you close it and then put it under a shelter? It could even be Unit 7.
Yeah,
I'll definitely put it back in. Do you mind if I go through your laptop and get the recordings and save them onto my SD card?
Don't mind at all.
All right. Love you, Reuben.
Love you guys so much. Yeah.
Do you really go to sleep at 9:30?
Well, no,
All right, fair enough. He didn't even make it down to his unit. Yeah, he's like, bang, bang, bang. Hey guys, can I use the toilet? They're all pretty friendly. I got a tattoo of this place where I am.
Really?
I don't live anymore, but yeah, it says. Can you see it? It says Unit 6.
Really?
Because I lived in Unit 6 in this building.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Reuben's got one too. It says Unit 6 as well. Yeah, we stretched very far to find the guest for this podcast. Leo's from Unit 1. Yeah. Oh, dystopia. All right, let's do dystopia.
Oh, yeah. Now, so was that your thoughts on today? Like, what you do? What would you do?
What would I do today?
If you had this supercomputer, what would be the things that you would do?
The priority would probably be expanding my intelligence, If I've got a kind of leg up like that, it's like for Reuben, the biggest issue he thinks about is climate change. For me, the biggest issue I think about is artificial superintelligence. So if I'm already connected to a computer, the first thing I'd do is make sure that my rate of increase in intelligence was equal to or greater than the rate of increase in artificial intelligence. And I'd make sure it would permanently stay that way, So that would probably take up a little amount of time, making sure that whatever limited artificial brain I've got attached to mine is connected to the internet and connected to every advance in artificial intelligence, so that any advance in artificial intelligence would automatically be an increase in my intelligence. And then...
So where would that end?
Yeah. Where would that end? Oh, it would end at the theoretical limits of computation, which are very high. The limit is, I memorized this the other week. I might have kind of forgotten it. So double check. I think it's a 10 kilogram computer. The limit of how much computation the 10 kilograms of matter could do is the same as a civilization of 10 billion humans running for 1 million years is, I think, an hour of that 10 kilograms running. In terms of how much computation is done. In terms of how many operations that have been made, So it's pretty high. It's like we'll get into Star Trek within a couple of seconds if we had one 10 kilogram computer. And obviously we don't have 10 kilograms. We have all the matter within our light cone, which is quite a lot of matter. It's like several galaxies, several 100,000 galaxies. So we would be very smart. So first purpose would be to make sure that acceleration is happening at the fastest pace, which would mean traveling in all directions at the speed of light and acquiring all the matter within my light cone as it is today, rather than as it would be in a day or 2 days or several years later.
What is a light cone?
Light cone is a physics term which refers to all the matter that is possible to reach at the speed of light. So if you shined a light in any direction today, your light cone would be all the matter that beam of light could hit So you've got the distance on one axis and the time on another axis, and the cone the distance is getting bigger as time increases. So I couldn't influence what you're doing right now because you're however many nanoseconds of light speed away from me, but I could influence it a couple of nanoseconds later. So you're outside of my light cone is instant, but in a couple of nanoseconds, the version of you a couple of nanoseconds in the future is part of my light cone. And the reason that there's a limited amount in our light cone is because you could travel at the speed of light in all directions, but because space is expanding, and it looks like it's going to keep expanding as far as our current knowledge of physics goes, accelerating even, there is matter in the universe that will never be within our light cone because it's moving away from us faster than the speed of light.
Faster.
Yeah. Because it's not quite moving. The space between it is getting bigger, is how it's done, how it's explained in physics. And for some reason, the mathematics of the space getting bigger is different to the mathematics of things moving.
Wow. Speed of light is the fastest.
Yeah, it's the fastest anything can move. But we know that space is expanding because if you shine a light through space, if you look at light that's come from very far away, the frequency of light goes down. It becomes redshifted. And so you can imagine the frequency, if it's going up and down and up and down and up and down as it moves through space, and you make the space bigger, the up and down is going to be taking place over a longer distance than it was before. So it gets redder and redder and redder. So that's how we know that space is expanding. One of the ways, yeah. Yeah, so matter can only travel below the speed of light, or above the speed of light, but not at the speed of light. And if it turns out we can't reach the speed of light, I want to acquire everything inside the light cone as quickly as possible. And then once we've got everything inside the light cone, then we can spend the rest of the universe's lifetime on just having fun. Yeah, it's a maximization of fun. What would you do with your slightly more super intelligent brain? Not super intelligent. Let's say just like it makes you 3 to 10 times smarter than the average human with a computer.
Yeah, I think of this idea of pushing knowledge to its limits and understanding where that threshold is really interesting, because I think you can't, just because you have more computational power in your brain doesn't make you still can't solve every problem. There's a lot of these sort of wicked problems which might not exist that you can compute, that you can come to in some other way. Or they just might not have answers that are possible to give.
It is possible that there will be some problem that is not provably unsolvable, like a lot of problems, but it's also requires so much computation to solve that you wouldn't be able to do it, or even measure how much computation it would take to solve. That's possible.
And so, I think what I find interesting, if you've ever learned about like Leonardo da Vinci was really interesting what he did, because he was extremely curious, and he would always sort of, he was very actually against book learning. Like, he didn't like reading books. He liked to do everything from experience. I read his note. I've got a copy of his notebooks and stuff.
Really?
Well, not the actual versions of it.
You've got a copy of them.
And he basically criticizes people for being book smart. He just wanted to try and do all these experiments and stuff. He believed that most of his experience wasn't real knowledge. And he continually, in his notebooks, tried to push the boundaries of what was possible at the time. But he would sort of plan it. He would always try to draw, square a circle, which is impossible to do. And no one's worked out how to do it as far as I understand.
So squaring a circle, what does that mean exactly?
I don't know, it's somehow taking a circle and then turning it into, mathematically, I don't know, the spaces don't add up or something, trying to actually get the same amount of,
right,
space
okay.
from a circle into a square. And I think it's just, there's some, I don't know the details of how it works, but I just know, basically, it's very, very, almost impossible to do for people to do. But he was continuing pushing that boundary. It was interesting because I guess the way his imagination worked is that he was able to think at the very point of knowledge that people had at that time and play around with those things and come up with those interesting innovations as a result. And so I think by trying to understand, I would probably want to understand some of the most difficult, complex problems that the world is facing now, most difficult science, most difficult mathematics, most difficult aspects of what we understand. And so you could just have a perspective on that. Because for anyone on Earth to be at that level that they could understand the complexity of those things would be so, it would take a lifetime to understand that. If you could understand, say, 5 or 10 of those fields, if you're that much smarter than everyone else on the planet, and being able to combine that and think, well, actually, now I understand that I'm the best thinker about this particular topic, this one.
I can imagine this super genius just sitting at a party being like, well, actually.
All this stuff. And then because it's about tying these different knowledge systems. It's like with the Nobel Prize winners, they've actually a lot of them come from fields which aren't specialized because they come with a completely different perspective on how to solve
And do something different. Yeah.
Yeah, so you have to, I think, understanding the limits of knowledge and then being able to apply that to new problems so that never really being able to apply that to would be interesting. But it obviously, I think what you were saying with light codes before, I think if you're 10 times smarter, we can just start exploring light codes.
Yeah. You think I would be smart enough to spread out the speed of light in all directions?
Right. Well, maybe. I don't know. I haven't seen it.
Yeah. I mean, I guess 10 people working together couldn't do it today. So maybe one person that's 10 times as smart also would be able to. But that would be my goal, to gather as many resources and then do that sort of thing and solve those problems.
That's right, yeah.
But yeah, I agree with you. That's a pretty high priority, just to understand the way the universe works.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at the end of the day, it really comes down to your prioritization of what you want to do. Whether it be you want to make sure that, sentient life exists for as long as possible, the human race exists for as long as possible, that life on Earth exists for as long as possible, that the universe continues to exist.
Yeah.
But, I don't know, there's so many priorities, I guess, that becomes the ethical question. What would be the main priority?
Yeah. I mean, I was thinking about this in my own life, because I was trying to work out what you should do with your time. If you have a goal of maximizing good, the good isn't well defined.
Yeah.
What should you do with your life? And I wasn't really sure at the time. This was about a year and a half ago. So I picked a bunch of things that would increase my ability to do good in the future, which was getting better at talking to people and dealing with people, getting better educated, acquiring more money and a better reputation, just basically acquiring resources, whether those resources money, knowledge, or people. And then you can eventually use that when you finally work out what the best thing to do is. Which might be a different way of thinking between us. Because that was how my answer was reflected. I was like, acquire as many resources as possible, and then work out what to do. Although I've totally failed in acquiring resources in my own life. I mean, I've done okay with the knowledge and people bit, but not the money bit.
Comes down. I mean, this is where a lot of philosophers and things in the past, I mean, dealing with the concept of what is good. You can have a completely utilitarian perspective, which is maximum happiness with maximum amount of people, or you can have a completely different approach where everyone has rights and that you should never compromise the rights of one for the benefit of the whole, even if it would maximize happiness for all the others.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Because that's really the basis of human rights and stuff is about that language. So, and then when you look at, say, Aristotle and what he talked about, it's a good life. And, a lot of these concepts like health, wealth, happiness, having a good body, good relationships, good health, and all that sort of stuff. Like, that's prosperity. Like, like what he said, a good life was really about wealth, but wealth through prosperity, through having a whole system of stuff that makes us feel content.
It's kind of interesting to think about what you want though. Like what you want today would be very different to what a human wanted 20 years ago or 100 years ago. Like if you asked a caveman what would be required for prosperity and happiness, they'd be like, well, if this cave was a little bit less wet, that would be nice. If the animals were a little bit easier to catch and there was a little bit more fruit on the trees, and I wasn't quite so itchy. It'd be good. It'd be good if the cave was a bit less wet. Like they wouldn't even conceive of, a virtue. They're just as smart as we were, as we are. They were just as smart as we are. They wouldn't conceive of the things that we might say, if we could have anything, what would we want today? Which would be very different, perhaps, to what people in 10 years would want. Which is the problem we have with AI, trying to work out how can we program what we want when we don't know what we want.
And when we agree, because AI is super intelligent, do we still agree with its decisions? It may make the most rational decisions, but there's always a question of priorities. And I think that's where the human element needs to come in, because there's never a right answer to that. It's competing possibilities, and unless you understand, like, you're always going to have to make a decision in some form of scarcity. It's going to have impacts on certain individuals or people. And so, how you program priorities is really one of the key elements to how you develop AIs and systems. Like, that's the embedding of ethics and stuff. We still haven't worked out that stuff as a society, so to put that into programs.
As far as superintelligence safety research goes, it's one field of study how we can, like, what we should program into it.
I mean, we don't even know how to program anything into it at the moment. We don't know how to make sure it does anything. So that's a separate field for that. But yeah, trying to work out what. There's a few different approaches to it. There's something called CEV, which is coherent extrapolated volition, where you would get the AI itself to predict what. I might be butchering this if Yevkowski is listening. He came up with this idea, which he isn't. I'm sure he isn't. Oh, fuck! I really hope it was him that came up with the idea. Whoever came up with it might be really.
He's getting credit for it.
Yeah, he's getting credit for it. It's to try and get the AI to predict what the optimal future group of humans would want. So you would take all the humans and where their wishes converge, then it would take some action and make the world like that. And when they diverge by a significant margin, it would just kind of leave it until something clear came true.
So he's like analyzing the Instagram likes.
Something like that, yeah. But yeah, you try to predict what humans would want in the future.
It's an interesting question because, like, I don't know, I haven't done a bit of like analytics and stuff. I remember doing a course and I was talking about, I think it was three, I don't know if I can, but there was descriptive, prescriptive, and diagnostic. 3 types of analytics.
Yeah.
So your descriptive is sort of saying what happened, what happened in a particular scenario. Your diagnostic is saying what was the cause of something. Descriptive is like what is happening, and then predictive or prescriptive. But basically, it's like, okay, if you just say you have like 5 handbags and you're selling them, you're a company, you're going to work out which is the best handbag to sell. That's like it's an analytical question. But if you want to say what is the optimal handbag to create, it is such a difficult problem to solve computationally. Because how do you work out? You have to always try every single possibility of what a handbag is within the limitations of what that definition is.
Yeah.
You know, to create the optimal thing of something is like, it's almost like going back into like Plato's theory of triangles. Like, what is the optimal triangle? You know, that's sort of an easy example. But
yeah, 60 degrees every side.
Yeah, like
every angle.
Yeah, but like there's this idea that there is a perfect thing.
Yeah.
When we characterize things based on subjective understandings of the world, the way a computer might categorize something might be completely different. When you're using a network, it might distinguish species on a level that we've never begun to distinguish them.
Yeah, I mean, species is one of the most clear definitions we have in biology, and it's still not very clear. Like we say, something is a species when the group members within a species can breed and have viable offspring, and they can't breed with things outside the species and have viable offspring. So horses are one species, but mules, if they breed with a donkey, mules are sterile, so they're not viable, which means donkeys and horses are different species. But then you end up with chains. You have shrews in Spain, which can breed with the shrews in Portugal, which can breed with the shrews in France and Germany, and then Poland and Russia. And there's a continuous chain of shrews that can breed together and create viable offspring. But the shrews in Russia can't breed with the shrews in Spain. This is an example, I don't know if that's true. But you can end up with these chains where there's no clear line by something's a species and by something's not a species. Because by one definition, the shrews in Spain and the shrews in Russia aren't. But if you go through the chain, then they are. So you totally, like the difference between us, like why would you take, say, human coherent extrapolated volition into account without taking into account the volition of chimpanzees, which are very closely related, or they're very closely related again to gorillas, and then further from gorillas is other apes, simpler monkeys, stupid cows, all the way down to viruses, which don't have really any thoughts at all.
I was thinking of like, if that's the definition of species, does that, like, to test that something, does that mean that actually try and get those different things to make? Like, and you're like,
again, we never tried that combination.
we suspect, but the horse has never really wanted to sleep naturally. As beautiful as it looks, like, we tried to dress it up, put some nice ponytails on it.
I mean, I'm talking a little bit. I'm talking a little bit outside of my field at the moment, so I'm not certain.
I just love it. That's the like, I don't know. If you try to say, well, a human and a monkey could be sensitive. It's like, how many humans have been sensitive? Like,
enough to get AIDS.
Scientist. You definitely got pregnant. Species.
Well, the point is, that could be if the in-between species between humans and chimpanzees hadn't died out, we might have a continuous chain between us and chimpanzees. Which would be trouble socially. That would be a big problem socially. I've really got to pee now too. We've made it to an hour and 40 minutes. Which is pretty good podcast length, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
We'll probably